Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of the Dissenter. I'm your host, as always, Ricardo Lopes, and today I'm joined by Sarah Dierna. She's a PhD candidate in interpretation studies at the Department of Humanities at the University of Catania in Italy, where she collaborates with the chair of theoretical philosophy. And today we're going to talk about her book slash monograph, il nascere che non ci voleva, Storia e teoria dell'Antinatalismo. That's the title in Italian. I mean, my translation is It's the Birth We Didn't Want, History and Theory of Antinatalism. So, Sarah, welcome to the show. It's a huge pleasure to everyone.
Thank you. Hi, Ricardo. Hi to all the listener, and thank you for the invitation.
Of course, I mean, as I said off record, yours is one of my favorite books of 2025. So I'm really happy to finally have you on the show. So let me start by asking you then, before we get into the actual content of your book slash monograph, what is antinatalism for you? Because I've noticed that probably different theorists, different philosophers, different people that identify as antinatalists have perhaps a somewhat different conception of it. So what is your conception of antinatalism?
I would say that antinatalism, for me, is a kind of philosophical perspective where we try to understand what does life is, and we try to explain the reason for which not to be born, it should be preferable. And for me, it's a perspective that includes all living beings, and I mean all sentient beings. But in my work, I focus only on the human beings. I mean, right now, and yeah, this is a philosophical position, I suppose. So it's uh, the more general reply I can tell you.
Yeah, I mean, so at least at this point, you don't try to extend it to all sentient beings. Is that it? Right.
Yes, because also in the type of research I'm doing right now, I'm trying to focus on the role of the consciousness. Yeah, this is the reason for which human beings are the focus. Also
Mhm.
because it's more difficult, I suppose, to find a way to pursue a antinatalist behavior in the non in the sentient beings, but in the non-human beings.
Sure. So, what got you interested in antinatalism? I mean, even as a philosopher, you could have gone through many different paths. I mean, philosophy basically includes everything out there in terms of intellectual pursuits. So, why antinatalism?
This is a good question. I like it. I have to say that I always got interested with the suffering of human beings, and when I started my career at the university, I started by discussing with that condition, that particular situation, where we have people who suffer from some disease. So the case of euthanasia, assisted suicide, because in my opinion, they were that particular cases in which we have to explain why not being to the world, it will be preferable to be in the world than to be in the world in that situation. Then, after the bachelor degree, I got to know the antinatalism, and I have to confess that it was quite randomly, because I read a paper of the professor who now is my supervisor, and I read this paper on antinatalism. In the same year, it was the 2020, I read the Italian translation of the Human Predicament by David Benatar, and yeah, I found in the antinatalism a way to discuss about the relation or Yeah, the dialectics between the possibility of not being into the world and being to the world in a user perspective, because it does not comprehend only that particular situation where we have the disease and some factual event, but we speak about suffering that all of us possess or a reason for suffer. So I mean, it's a kind of more comprehensive philosophical position, I suppose.
I mean, just out of curiosity, is your supervisor Professor Busso?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I also like his work very much. So Giovanni Busso, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
really like his work. So let me now get into the book slash monograph itself. So you start with the question of why does something exist rather than nothing, since nothingness is simpler than being? I mean, why do you think it is important to start with metaphysics when talking about antinatalism?
It's the perspective that I had on my book, and then that I'm trying to deepen now. And as for the Leibniz question, I think that it is quite interesting, because if we change this question and try to consider, when we speak about nothing and being if we try to consider this question related to the human life, we can I mean, it becomes quite interesting, because we have to understand why, if nothing and so not to be into life, it's easier, it's simple, it's less painful, we are in the world, why we continue existing. And as for the metaphysical perspective, I think that I mean, in my opinion, it's a kind of perspective that comes before the ethical issue, because first of all, we must understand, what does it mean to be human? What does it life? And what is suffering? And as for my perspective, what is interesting of the metaphysical position is that we try to compare our being into the world with the presence, with the existence of the other beings. And I mean, it turns out that we have the existence is quite the same, because also a rock, also the chair where I'm now, it's going to be dilated by the time. But for man, this is reason of suffering, for all sentient beings. But for humans, this is reason of suffering, this is reason of pain. And the normal end of everything for man is death, and it's one of the main reason of of suffering, of troubles for human beings. So this is my perspective, and I think that the metaphysical position gives us the possibility to speak about the meaning of birth, the meaning of being born, and on which basement we can build up all the ethical issue which derives from this knowledge.
It's very interesting. I mean, it sort of reminds me of Kant and Schopenhauer, where they start their philosophy with metaphysics and then go to epistemology, and only then they get into ethics. I mean, it's like we have to have an understanding of the world we're living in and what we can know about it, and only then we can get into ethics. That's interesting. I mean, do you have that same sort of perspective?
Yeah, I think that my perspective is it goes in this direction, because I think that like a kind of Socratic way, you know, the if we know what is good and what is wrong, then we can be able to adapt our behavior to that knowledge. And I think that with antinatalism, it's quite the same. Also because we have, I mean, antinatalism, it's not so common. It's a radical issue, and first of all, I think it's important to make this argument more clear. We can try to understand this. Um, what are the reasons, and then we can discuss about the result, the behavior, the ethical issue, like all procreation and so on.
Okay, so another important question here has to do with how we deal with living beings. So, what separates the inorganic from the organic? How do you address that question?
For me, there is no difference between the organic and inorganic. I mean, on the one hand, of course, they are different. They are two different ways in which the matter goes to individuate and the individuation in a Schopenhauer sense. But I think that it's only a question of difference. I mean, it's there is no privilege, there is no evolution, and I think that the similarity I mean, that there are many similarities. For example, the example of the desk. The desk starts and it's an existent being that start and go to finish. And the same we can say for life. It starts and it finish like all the existent beings, but for life, this is reason of pain, and this is reason. I mean, we call the beginning moment birth, we call the ending moment death. So, and we leave all this period between the beginning and the end as a reason of pain. But apart from that, I think that they represent only two different ways of the matter.
Yes. Tell us about the ontocentric paradigm you bring into your book, and how does it differ from an anthropocentric paradigm?
Yeah, it's the I call the ontocentric paradigm the paradigm that, in my perspective, can be interesting to pursue because we have a kind of relation between the being of the living being and the huge being. So we can discuss about life, not considering life from the inner side, as in the more maybe anthropocentric position, but we try to understand life from a perspective in which we understand what is life and to to compare it with, as I said, the other existent beings, so we can. Yeah, we can see life in this I mean, within the nature, and to discover that it's not so easy as the presence of the other beings and all the question, all the concept that I try to discuss so far.
Mhm. Tell us about the event of being born. I mean, and I guess that this is also relevant to other kinds of ethical questions, like questions related to reproductive ethics and abortion and so on. I mean, we maybe we'll get into that later, but what is it to be born, and how should this question be approached?
Well, I think that being born, we can have different replies, and it depends on how we want to deal with this question, with this topic. Because, for example, if we consider the position of some philosopher, I'm thinking to Hannah Arendt. For this woman, being born, it means it's the open to the future. So maybe it represents a new beginning. If we consider the biological perspective, it is only the born of a new cells that then is going to evolve and so on. I think that there is no one reply. I mean, it depends on the perspective. I can say that for me, being born is the coming into the world of a new living being. And if we want to consider the sentence and human being, it's the coming into the world of humans that goes to suffer, that goes to start and to to start his life and that goes to end it, and who leave this period with pain, anger, suffering, and yeah, but I think that from my metaphysical perspective, before any ethical issue like reproduction, procreation, and yeah, it's the simple coming into the world of a new beings.
Let me ask you this. Do you think we are really predisposed biologically to wanting children or simply predisposed to wanting sex? Because for me, it's not clear at all, and I'm not convinced that we really want to have children biologically. I mean, that we have to learn culturally from other people. First, we have to associate having sex with reproduction and children. And then we also have to learn that, I mean, perhaps we should want to reproduce instead of just wanting to have sex. So what is your perspective on that?
Uh, Maybe I change the verb. I will say that we are not predisposed to want children or want sex, but we are predisposed to have sex and children. I mean, for me, it's I think that it's natural. Our body are predisposed to have children. It's a biological way of the living things, and we are predisposed to have sex. And also, this is a biological way in which our body is structured. So I think that there is more biology than we can imagine. But I would say also that the difference and is that man has the human beings has the possibility to understand this biological way and to stop it, to decide to control, to understand, and to ask why we have to, we need to have children, why we can distinguish between sex and having children. I mean, for example, for the animal, but it's my opinion. I'm not. I'm not so sure. I
Yeah.
think that there is not this difference between sex and reproduction. So I mean, maybe we are able to understand the difference because of the the dialectics between nature and culture. So maybe because of the culture we are able to understand. But first of all, I think that it's all biological structure of our body.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I guess that, of course, many times we hear people justifying their reproduction, them having children, by way of it being just a biological predisposition or even some sort of biological imperative. But I mean, I think that's a really weak argument from an ethical perspective, because if we're going to justify reproduction on the basis of having sort of a reproductive drive, then there are many things we are biologically predisposed to, even things that are violent, that we shouldn't justify just on the basis of as having those
Yeah.
predispositions or those drives, right?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think that to say that we are biological predisposed does not mean that we must do it. We have this like will to live, which we cannot control. Sometimes I also notice that this is one of the more common reply that people use to criticize the antinatalism. But I mean, it's also the most easy maybe. We have the knowledge, we have the possibility to understand what is reproduction, what does it mean, and also uh, I mean the biological structure does not exclude that we receive the influence from the society or the normal evolution of life. No, you know, we are like okay, we grow up, we got married, we got to have a family, and there are some kind of cultural influence that I think influence our decision.
Yes, sure. Does antinatalism have anything to say about abortion?
Yes, I would say that antinatalism deal and may deal with the abortion, but because of course we are considering a practice to stop procreation, to stop. But when there is something that is not a new living being in the like an existing being, but yeah, I think that it may. Deal with this topic, but I think it's a second step because first of all, we have to consider what does it mean to the problem of life. Then we can consider all these ethical other issue that we can adopt, we can take to find a solution.
Mhm. And what would you say are the harms brought about by life? I mean, just by being born, by living, what harms are we exposed to?
Wow. I mean, yeah, this is a good question, but because I think that we cannot find any objective suffering. I think that the simple fact that we are alive, it means that we will suffer for something, and the reason for suffering are different. Maybe I would say that if I consider some features that are intrinsic in every life, we can speak about the role of the consciousness, and I'm trying to focus on the role of the time and to discover or try to understand in which way the meaning of time can be a reason of pain for human beings, because we are aware of time, so the time who pass, and it means the loss of something. So maybe I would say that these can be two features of suffering for human beings, and yeah, but for human beings, only for human beings. I mean, I would say, and because there are some structural features that comes with every new life.
Mhm. Yeah, do you think that, I mean, when it comes to the harms and the the positive aspects of life, do you think that we can evaluate that objectively, since different people have different perspectives on what happens to them and deal with what happens to them, good and bad, in different ways? I mean, do you think we can evaluate that objectively or only subjectively?
I would say only subjective, but because I mean, each person has his own reason to suffer, and the stuff, the situation that make me sad are not the same that make you sad. But and I cannot evaluate and compare my suffering with your suffering. I think
Mhm.
that we can only we agree only on the fact that we suffer for something
Yeah, yeah.
in a formal way, maybe.
Mhm. And I mean, how does the reality of death frame life itself? I mean, the fact that we are inevitably going to die, what sort of implications does that have for our lives as human beings?
I think that we must distinguish between death as the act of dying and death as something which comes with life. And I try to do this to make this distinction, because if we speak about death as the last moment, the act of dying, I mean, I quite agree with Epicurus. I'm not sure that is so painful because we are going to. I mean, we are alive, so we cannot. We still are here, and we don't experience death. But I would say that it's the act of passing away. But there is another way to understand maybe death, which is more painful for beings, for human beings, and is the type of death that's like a process. So that kind of death that comes with life. So from the first moment we are into the world, we start to live, we start to die, because each moment we lost something that does not come back anymore. So I think that in this way, if it's I mean, it frames in some way the life, because it's something that yeah, that comes with our life each time we experience the loss of something.
Mhm. So this is something that you've already touched on a little bit earlier, but is intelligence or some of our other psychological traits something that makes humans special in comparison to other animals, particularly when it comes to how we approach existential questions?
uh, I can give you two reply. The first one
No?
is not
Okay.
mine. It's there is one of the moralists say of Leopardi, in which he said that human beings are perfect, but perfect in imperfection. And I will say that if we consider the intelligence as a kind of privilege of human being, we can say that this privilege is a privilege in imperfection. Because of the suffering that intelligence, as in the sense of being aware, it involves for human being. In this regard, I quite agree with Peter Bessel's position. But on the other hand, I would say that there is no privilege, because intelligence, it's the way in which human beings adapt themselves into the world, like the animal as it's our way to adapt and to survive. I think that intelligence is only the way in which human beings can survive into the world. So I mean,
Mm.
it's a kind of evolution, maybe, but I think that there is no privilege for it.
Mhm. Why do you think, in your understanding, why is it that antinatalism tends to get rejected by most people?
Uh, for many reasons. I mean, each time that some people reject some of my perspective when we are also in a conversation, first of all, I always think that I have to consider that the people who reply to me is a people who is alive. And so he considered the antinatalist result and solution, and the meaning of antinatalism from the perspective of a living being who exists, and who wants to continue to exist. So I think that this is one of the one of the features that we must, maybe not we can, we must take into account when we speak. We try to understand the reason of the this rejection. At the same time, I would say that it's not only a question, it's not only a problem of the acceptance, but I mean, maybe it's also a problem of understanding. I'm not so sure that anti-nativism is so easy to understand for people, and because they have their own perception of life, their evaluation of life. So I'm not so sure that such a huge and radical perspective can be uh, yeah, if they can understand. I mean, when I say that, but it is a philanthropic position because it concerns with the suffering of human being. Most of them seems quite shocked. I mean, we are speaking about the preference of not being born, and you see that it's philanthropic. But yes,
Yeah, I mean, I guess that there's many things here, many complications. First of all, it's like going against some of our biological impulses, right? Because I mean, people think that it's just normal. It's just to be expected to have children to reproduce, and then we also live in cultures. I mean, I don't think there's any culture out there that is anti-natalist. I mean, all cultures are pro-natalist because otherwise they wouldn't even be around. I mean, an antinatalist culture, over time, people who were part of that culture would simply go extinct. And then, I mean, I
yeah,
guess it would be the end of an antinatalist culture. But and then there's also the fact that we are already living, we already exist, we already have an investment in this life, and so I mean, trying to ask people if it would have been better for them to never have been born. It's almost, at least for most people, it sounds similar to asking them if it would be better for them to be dead, right?
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
sure.
because they associate the first sort of non-existence with the second sort that comes after they've already existed, right?
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree, and also because I think that most of us, maybe fortunately, I would say, uh, we were able to build our life in a way where we can balance the suffering with the pleasure or the our
Mm-hmm.
project. So maybe
Yeah.
and also, I think that the presence of project, of aim, of meaning helps, yeah, helps us to go in a direction. So that move us on, so we can continue living, and we have yeah, an aim. We want to pursue that meaning, that result, and then go and go. And this is the way in which the life flow and go until it ends.
Okay, so as antinatalists, we many times use arguments based on suffering, right? That it's inevitable that when a new being, a new human being is brought into existence, he or she
Yeah.
will suffer inevitably. I mean, in different ways, different people suffer in different ways, but suffering is inevitable. But that kind of argument, for most people or many people at least, is not convincing enough because they also suffer. They know that they suffer, but they can give meaning to their own suffering, and they don't think that is a good enough argument to prevent them from reproducing, because they think that new people, through their meaning systems, I don't know, it can be through religion, it can be through some sort of secularist some sort of secularist belief system, they can give meaning to their suffering, right?
Okay, okay. Now it's clear. Yeah, yes, but also in this case, I would reply that we cannot. I mean, okay, for us, maybe we can. I would reply to these people. Maybe for us, it's okay. We can not. We can consider suffering something bad, but not so bad that we should prevent from to bring other people into the world. It's okay, but we cannot decide for the other people, because for
Yeah.
us, suffering is not so painful, it's not so harmful, and we can balance it with the
Mhm.
rest of our life. But we are not sure that it will be the same for the other people. But because, of course, we don't know the life they are going to live, and we are. I mean, we are not them. Maybe as I said before, I can suffer for something that for you is not reason of suffering, and we cannot know what the way they deal with suffering. I think
Mhm.
that it's quite selfish to think, yeah, for me, suffering is not strong enough. We can bring someone else into the world, and we will be present, and we will be there for helping him. okay, all good, all nice, but we cannot be sure that for the people who is into the world, it's okay, and
Yeah,
that.
I actually think that the argument based on risk, that there's a risk that
Mhm.
the person you're going to bring into the world will not like their life, will suffer beyond anything that they can give any meaning to. I mean, because there's that risk, you shouldn't reproduce, right? I mean, for me at least, that's one of the strongest antinatalist arguments.
Yeah, also for me, it's one of the strongest arguments, and I mean, it's. I think that it's also one of the more. It's one of the arguments that make all the people agree, because, for example, other arguments. I don't know. I'm thinking about the asymmetry argument. Is quite strong, but many people criticize it for many reasons. And with the risk argument, I think that more and more people should be agree with this one, because we are not speaking about, we are not evaluating life, saying it's bad, it's not bad, it's preferable not to be born. We are speaking about risk, so it's something that it's clear, because also the life of the already living being, it's exposed to the risk, and we must consider that we cannot prevent from the risk of life, because we don't know which kind of risk we are going to be exposed.
Yes. So let's talk a little bit about history here, because you also talk about the history of antinatalism in your book slash monograph. So do we know how old antinatalism is?
I think that antinatalism is quite old, and I'm not able to find a starting point. But sometimes I usually to reply to this question saying that maybe with the beginning of the life and of the aware life, we start to have some feeling about the arm of life itself, because there are many passages in one of that is Leopardi, the first of the moralists, is the history of the human being, and he spoke about this population who celebrated the moment in which a person dies, and the people cried when there was a new a new living born being. And the same with Zapfe, because Zapfe, the Last Messiah, is a kind of Genesis tale, but with a different meaning. So I think that these are different way to say that maybe the awareness, the knowledge of the life and of the suffering of life and of the through that it would have been better not to be born. It starts with the presence of man. I also consider the Silenus reply to Midas, and this myth, it's a popular myth. I mean, it's a kind of story which is not which is present in the population, in the first population, in the first Greek population. So it means that the fact of life was quite clear since the beginning.
Mhm. Have there been, or would you say that there have been different forms of antinatalism across history?
Yes, of course, and yeah, of course, also because of the time, and it depends on the distinction then, because there are some distinction between the so-known proto-antinatalism and the contemporary one, with which I disagree. For example, the Lachmanova distinction between the passive and the active way. It's something that I disagree, because I think that it's a different paradigm. We cannot compare. And I think that the distinction of Morioka is it's quite good. I mean, I agree with this distinction because it's useful, and it helps me to he helped me to find the distinction between the metaphysical and the ethical perspective, because Morioka distinguished between the so-known birth negation and the procreation negation. And that is a way, in my opinion, to say that we have a kind of metaphysical perspective on antinatalism, where we try to understand the meaning of birth, and this is the key concept of the Greek and all the first manifestation, where we were able to understand the difficulty of life, but we do nothing to solve it. And on the other side, the so-known procreation negation, which represent, in my opinion, a kind of normative way. We should do something in order to stop the birth of new living being.
And what is it that in the book you call proto-antinatalism? I mean, what does that mean, and what does it apply to in the history of antinatalism?
Yeah, I took this proto-antinatalism from the Lachmanova, so it's not my my words, but I like it also because, I mean, it's a way to distinguish from the contemporary one. And if I consider the Morioka distinction, and I will say that proto-antinatalism, so the proto-form, are all the antinatalist perspective that comes before Benatar, so before the contemporary debate on antinatalism, where the discussion was but the discussion was kind of in my opinion, it's a kind of metaphysical discussion on the problem, because we speak about only about birth. We don't consider the procreation or the normative or what we have to do to stop procreation. We consider what life is.
Yeah. So let's start by focusing here a little bit on the Western tradition in philosophy. Let's talk about antinatalism in ancient Greece. I mean, do you think that at least in the Western tradition, it represents the oldest antinatalist manifestations? And how did the Greeks back then approach matters of birth, life, death, and existence?
First reply, yes, if we consider the Western tradition, and I think that the Greek philosophy maybe is one of the most oldest, at least in Europe, and but because they were aware of the tragedy of life, and I also asked for the question about life, death, meaning. I'll say that in the Greek philosophy, and there is a kind of a perception of what does it life and what does it death, but it was a perception far from the modern way to consider life. I mean, it was a kind of ontocentric, I would say, position, because they consider always life in relation to the general meaning of the word, the general meaning of the nature. So they consider life as well as the death natural way. I mean, it's natural that we come into the world. It's natural that we pass away. We call this birth. We call this the end, death. And I mean, they were quite aware of the suffering. They were quite aware of the tragedy of staying into the world, but they accept it because it was in a general, from a user perspective, it was kind of, I don't want to say normal, but yeah, they accept because they don't consider the life from their inner side perspective. Life is something that it's natural. It's the natural presence of something, and that has no real meaning. So, and also what is interesting, as I said, the Silenus reply was a kind of story which was common between the population. So does it mean that it was a kind of paradigm. The people, as I said, to the cultural atmosphere was quite aware of the suffering and of the situation of human beings.
I mean, we're focusing on philosophy, but I guess that these sort of topics, issues related to human existence, life, death, suffering, and so on, also manifested in their own fiction. I mean, the Greek poets also wrote about these sort of topics, even though perhaps some later philosophers like Plato, I mean, he was not really fond of the poets. I mean, he preferred
Yeah.
Socrates and the philosophers. But I mean, these are topics regarding human life that have manifested in Greece, not only in terms of its philosophy, but also its fiction, right?
Yeah. If you're talking about for example, the poets like the tragedy of Sophocles, or
Mm-hmm.
yeah, of course, and I included them into the philosophical position because
Yeah.
yeah, in part because of now I'm studying Nietzsche, and Nietzsche considered the Greek and studies all these kind of atmosphere, Greek atmosphere from this philosophical perspective, and also because the tragedy and I mean they were way to represent a piece of life. I mean, so they are not. It's a kind of. I'm not sure it's a fiction. I think that it's a way to represent life. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, definitely Nietzsche's The Birth of Tragedy is a very interesting book about that period of Greek history and the poets and so on, and what he would call the Dionysians and and
Yeah.
things
Yeah.
like that. So, uh, do you think that there's any first antinatalist philosopher that we can identify?
Uh, no. No, because of the reason I told you. I mean, it was a kind of a different paradigm. So it was a kind of general awareness of the tragedy of life and of the yeah, all the implication of to be into the world. So no, I prefer speak about a kind of a different paradigm, a different perception, which was general.
Mhm. Was Aristotle, of course, now we're going forward a little bit. Was Aristotle an antinatalist?
No, no, because I was thinking that there was a passage where I spoke about Aristotle in the book, but no, because the passage I was thinking it the same myth between Midas and Silenus, but it must be comprehended in the role of the soul. So it was the young Aristotle who was the in the Plato Academia. So no, I think no.
How about, again, in the Western tradition, how about Christianity? I mean, is a Christian antinatalism possible, keeping in mind that Christianity, I mean, at least as it is today, and as it seems to me has been throughout most of its history, seems like a doctrine that supports pro natalism par excellence?
Uh, yeah, this your question gives me the possibility to clarify my position because I
Okay.
spoke about the Christian antinatalism in my book, but I try to I mean I discussed the Théophile de Giraud position on the Christian perception. I mean on the possibility to interpret some Christian the Old and the New Testament in an antinatalist way. But and I find his interpretation quite interesting. But I think that we must comprehend, we must understand the meaning of the Christian religion in its reality. I mean, and from this perspective, I would say that, of course, there is no any antinatalism in the Christian religion, but because the meaning and of this religion it's quite different from the antinatalist position, of course. I think that the De Giraud interpretation were quite some of that yeah, were quite interesting, and they can open to new reflection. But in general, I would prefer to say that it's only an interesting interpretation. I mean, I'm not sure to say that there is a to say that there is a Christian antinatalism, but because we have to distinguish. I mean, it's a kind of faith, and it speaks about the afterlife, and there are a kind of meaning about the sacrality of life that mm, I mean, I think that it's easier to say that Christian cannot be antinatalist.
So you don't think then there's anything in the Bible that could be interpreted as explicitly antinatalist?
Uh, maybe the Coelet, but maybe only, yeah, the Coelet or some passage between the other book. But yeah, if I have to consider the book of Coelet, Ecclesiastes, in Italian it's Coelet. I'm not sure it's the same in the international words. And yeah, maybe it can be considered an antinatalist because there are also some reference uh, on the um, on the affirmation that it would have been better not to be born. But apart from that, I mean, we can, as I said, we can interpret some of this passage in an antinatalist way, but I'm not sure that it's our own interpretation. I mean,
Mm. Yeah, fair enough. And I mean, of course, for this kind of question, we have to rely on the New Testament and the collection of books that they have there. But was Jesus in any way an antinatalist, or do you think he could have been an antinatalist?
uh, no, I would say no. I mean, yeah, I always have in mind all the interesting, the book of the Théophile de Giraud, and I would say, oh yes, there are many passages, but I have to consider my perception, and my perception is that no, because the meaning, the aim of the Bible and the New Old Testament is another one, and is not against life.
Yeah. What sort of manifestations of antinatalism can we find in Eastern religion or philosophy?
Well, I like that you speak about manifestation, because I would say that we have many manifestation, but yeah, they are manifestation of antinatalism. So again, we can consider it quite similar to the antinatalist perspective, but the meaning, the aim of this manifestation is quite different from the from our position. Because, for example, I don't know, we can speak about the dukkha, which is the contents of the first through in the Buddhism, and
Yeah.
it's quite similar. We start from the reality of suffering, but then there is a way, according to them, to overcome this, and we
Mhm.
have the eighth path, but the aim is not to stop procreation, but to stop the cycle of rebirth. So we
Yeah.
can, yeah, they negate birth, but is our coming into the world. I mean, it's not against procreation. And there was also a kind of distinction in the level of the society, and in the lower level, there is they must procreate. So there is a kind
Mhm.
of is another kind of structure. Or if we consider that they don't have the kind of ascetism. I mean, ascetism is not for not procreate. It's for to stop desire, to join a kind of detachment from the reality. It's quite different from the antinatalism position. But I think that we can. Yeah, there are kind of similarity. Of course, it's quite meaningful that we have the same starting point, because it means that I mean, there was a quite awareness of the suffering of the world. Then we start from the same ground. Then they found another way to solve, to figure it out.
I mean, this is just my opinion, but I guess that in at least an indirect way, uh, if you fully commit to the Buddhist position of trying to overcome as much as you can your own desires, then at least indirectly it could lead you to antinatalism, because if you're trying to overcome your desires, one of them is to have sex. So I mean, I don't know what you think about that. So
Yes, but I think that you stop to have sex and then you stop for physical reason to have children. I mean, you not stop sex for not having children. You stop for not feeling the desire. That means
yeah.
that create a kind of relation. So I'm not sure. It can be considered a kind of antinatalism. I'm not
Yeah,
sure
yeah.
to reply to your question in the right way.
No. Yes, I agree with you. It's probably not an antinatalist position because it
Mm,
doesn't come from the argument or the premise that you shouldn't reproduce because it's
yeah,
bad to reproduce. It's just that you end up not reproducing because as a consequence of overcoming your desire. So it's not
yeah.
the same thing, right? Yeah,
And
yeah.
also because I think, oh, if I can add, I also think that, I mean, as I said, we start from the same position of the suffering of the world, but for the antinatalism, we can stop only by not reproducing. For them, the solution is a detachment from the reality. It's different.
Yeah.
There is a different way to stay into the world, I would say.
No, yeah, I agree with you. So, in the more modern period, what manifestations of antinatalism can we find? And perhaps let's start by comparing ancient forms of antinatalism with the ones that we saw in the 19th and the 20th centuries.
Mm. I would say that in the modern age, we don't have the anti-natalist, some anti-natalist manifestations. I mean, we can find in Leibniz, Pascal, some argument that can be a kind of premise for the anti-natalism. I was thinking about the divertissement, that is kind of the mechanism of defense of Zapf. But I think that what happened in the modern age was the affirmation of the anthropocentric paradigm, because there was the trust that man can know the nature, can control it, and by controlling it, he can be able to join the happiness, and to the idealism was uh, the the top of this anthropocentric perception, and this trust on man and on the possibility of man to say into the world, to control the world, and in fact, after the, or I mean, in the same time of the idealism, we have the pessimistic perspective in Germany.
Yeah.
And I don't like pessimistic, but this is the way in which the group of philosophers of the second half of the 19th century were considered. So just to be clear, and that represents a kind of coming back to the first position, the coming back to the suffer for the world, the way the world it is, and so I don't speak about antinatalism in the modern age, maybe in the second half of the 19th century, but because we come back to some perception of the Greek philosophy, of the past philosophy, and I think that if we have to speak about modern antinatalism, maybe it starts with. Yeah, it started at the end of the 19th century. So it's Kürning and Zapfe. Uh, but yeah, and then it's a kind of proto-antinatalism also because the it remains a kind of metaphysical mm, uh, frame for the argument of being born. I mean, it's still not the argument in the Benatarian way, I would say.
Do you think that there's anything in the philosophy of someone like Schopenhauer that we could link to antinatalism?
Yes and not, because I think that there are many features that can be considered like antinatalism, some quotations that can be interpreted in an antinatalist. And first of all, I mean, Schopenhauer speaks about the will to live and the suffer that the will is for man, okay, but in the first page of the word as will and representation,
Mhm.
he gave us a kind of advice. When we have to read his book, we have to consider his book as a system, as a unique book. And if we have to follow this method, I would say that is not an antinatalism, because we can only try to follow the will to live. I mean, and in my opinion, the way in which we can stop the evolution, the power of the will, it's a way that is different from the antinatalist behavior. It's a kind of the ascetic position, the role of the art, the role of the compassion. But there are some passages in which Schopenhauer himself assess that we cannot murder the child, and we can only follow the nature. I mean, we cannot stop procreation in this sense.
How about Hartman? You also mention him in your book. I mean, is there anything in his philosophy that you would consider antinatalist?
Uh, yes, if we consider the results, because we have this evolution from the unconscious to the conscious reality, and this movement bring to the end, which is the end of the world and the end of the human being. And so we can maybe consider that, yeah, there is this kind of movement which is divided in different ages, and at the end we join these results. But I'm not so, I mean, yeah, maybe we can consider a kind of antinatalism, because the result is that we stop with human beings. But I think that it's a kind of antinatalism that we should comprehend in the idealistic position of Hartmann. I mean, it's a kind of the movement that uh, the world goes to do apart from the human being. The unconscious or the conscious is not the conscious or unconscious of the human being. It's a general movement of the world. So I'm not sure it's antinatalism in the way that we decide to not have children because we understand. And
So, in modernity, in modern times, who would you say is the first full-fledged antinatalist? I mean, who was the first philosopher that, in his or her philosophy, was explicitly making antinatalist arguments?
Uh, I would say maybe the pseudonym Kurning, but I only I mean, I don't want to tell more about him, because I studied only the beautiful works of Karima Karma, and so for the philosopher that I know better, I would say Peter Wesselsapf. For me, it's a kind of yeah, turning point, and between the previous form of antinatalism and the contemporary way, because the passage of the last Messiah, it's quite interesting. We have the assessment that you don't stop, you have to stop procreate, and leave the earth free from the presence of man. So I would say maybe Peter Wesselsapf.
Okay, so tell us more about him, about Peter Wessel Zapfe. I mean, how important is he in the history of antinatalism, and what were his main ideas and contributions to the topic?
It's a philosopher that I appreciate in a particular way. I like his philosophy and the way he discusses and he studies man, because it's a kind of biological perspective. So it's something where I mean, in my opinion, he has not a kind of inner side of the human being. He studies human being as all the other animal, and we discovered that. Life is not so beautiful as we believed. And I think that one of the main role is the role of the consciousness and the identity between consciousness and harm, which is something I mean, it's not new, but in the Last Messiah, it's quite clear that the consciousness, it's one of the main reason of suffering for human beings, and it's also a kind of metaphysical position in which man is considered as part of the nature, but it's a nature that refuses presence and all the story. In my perspective, it represents I spoke before as a kind of starting point, as a turning point, because uh, in my opinion, it represents the moment in which we can find both the previous form of antinatalism and the contemporary form of antinatalism, because we have, on the one hand, the metaphysical perspective, so the description of the human being, this descriptive uh, awareness of the words, and on the other hand, we have the ethical reply: stop, don't reproduce, don't be fruitful. And so in this way, I think that yeah, it can be considered a kind of key moment in the passage between the old and the contemporary antinatalism.
I mean, this is just an aside. This is just a joke. But since you're Italian, and at a certain point you said there that, I mean, in Zapfas, I mean, he sort of got into how life is not beautiful. I guess that probably you're not very fond of Roberto Benigni's La Vita Bella.
Yeah. And it's a movie that I don't like, but I suppose that I one of the few people in Italy who don't appreciate this movie. So
I mean, he won an Oscar with it, so I guess that's why Italian people also love him. So, right.
yeah, and also yeah, I mean for many reasons, but I don't like.
Okay, so let's get into the theoretical aspects of antinatalism. We already talked a little bit about them. Okay, so earlier we talked about, you mentioned the asymmetry argument, we talked about the risk argument. What do you think are the strongest arguments in favor of antinatalism?
As we said before, I think that the risk argument is one of the strongest arguments. We are speaking against antinatalism, or
No, in favor of
in favor. Yeah,
antinatalism.
the risk argument, in my opinion, is one of the strongest arguments to deal with antinatalism, because we are not. I mean, I think that it's the more formal. We don't speak about suffering, we don't judge, we don't make evaluation, but we only say that we expose someone else to the risk of coming into the world, and all the things that we have discussed before, and also the quality of life argument. It's a kind of argument that I appreciate. It's maybe the most simple, and because I mean, we have only see at the life and see all uh, the difficulty that we have in our life every day. But I think that it's quite strong, maybe for this reason. And yeah, the other, uh, I mean, they are interesting, but I'm not sure that they are really, really strong. For example, the asymmetry argument or the consent argument, they are quite interesting, but I'm not sure they are so strong.
Okay, so let's tackle those two arguments in turn. So, what do you make of David Benatar's asymmetry argument?
Uh, well, I like this argument, and also I like I mean, I find it interesting because Benatar was able to put together two different hypotheses.
Mhm.
Hypothesis, maybe in English.
Yeah.
One in which X exists, and the other in which this X does not exist. And from this, to compare these two possible reality, we can say that existence is not better than non-existence, and at the same time that maybe non-existence it will be preferable. So I appreciate the main idea, but I think that in the asymmetry argument, there is something. I mean, I'm not sure about the premise 3 and 4, and which are the premise where we discuss about the non-existent being, because in
Mhm.
my opinion, we are discussing this premise regards always the living being. So maybe, yeah, maybe it's only an argument that it's quite interesting, but I'm not sure that we are comparing these two situations. We are comparing all the life which already exists. So maybe the quality of life argument is stronger and more useful, and less subject to all the criticism that the asymmetry argument. Yeah, there were many people who criticized this argument for the
Mhm.
role of the premise. So
Yeah.
maybe other arguments are better.
Yeah, before you tell us a little bit more about the quality of life argument, let me just say that I'm quite fond of David Benatar's philosophy, but when it comes to antinatalism specifically, I think I said this in my interview with Amanda Sukenik for her podcast, the Exploring Antinatalism podcast. I mean, I said that over time, I've been moving away from some of his antinatalist arguments, specifically the asymmetry argument, because the bit about the non-existent being, I mean, for me, is not really quite convincing. And I think that particularly for people who are not antinatalists and you're trying to argue in favor of antinatalism, I mean, it's a very weird argument for most people because
Yeah.
it's very hard for them to understand why you would be talking about someone who would never exist, right?
Yeah, and also if we, but I come back to Plato. I mean, maybe also not Plato, but if we consider the non-existent, and I mean the judgment we do are, as I said, in my opinion, are judgment that regards the existent being. Because if we speak with non-existent, it's like we can say anything about them. We can only
Mm.
evaluate life as it is, and
Yeah.
to establish from the our position of living being that maybe not being born it will be better, but because something already exists. I mean, yeah, it's something. It's an argument that I find quite strong if we want to compare, because it's clear, but there are also, for me, there are many, there is something that must be clarified.
Mhm. And what is then the quality of life argument, and what do you think about it?
I think that it's, as I said, it's one of the strongest arguments, and also one of the maybe the easiest argument, but because I mean, we can create a list of the all possible reason of suffering, and we can consider the suffering that we received, the suffering that we create for other human beings. I mean,
Yeah.
it's maybe one of the argument that requires less less dialectics. So we don't have to speak enough about it because it's clear. And it's interesting that to come back to Benatar, the asymmetry argument is one of the most argued, criticized. The quality of life is not so criticized. So maybe
Mhm.
it's quite clear from itself that life is contents, all these bad stuff, maybe.
Mhm. And what do you make of the argument from consent? I mean, do you think that
Mm.
there is a convincing argument? And as a philosopher, what do you think about it?
I think that I understand the argument and the reason of the argument, but I disagree with it. It's one of the position that I found. I mean, for me, there is no sense in this argument because I understand that the role of the consent. Anyone can decide for him, for his or her coming into the world, but I mean, it's impossible to ask to other people the consent. Also, in the if we read in the encyclopedia the voice for consent, we have the A actor and a B actor, and I mean there is a living being, and also we have all the other possible situation. He must be aware, he must be in healthy to take decision. So I think that with the unborn, it's impossible to have this kind of people who is able to gives you a consent to his coming. I think that I in the book I spoke about a kind of gap between the first and the third person. I mean, as I said, we cannot decide for someone else because even if our decision seems quite good and we have the best the best we can do the best for our kids, we cannot know the life is going to live, and we cannot decide for him because maybe for us it's easy to solve some problem, but for him it's a reason of suffer. And so I mean we cannot decide for other. There is a huge gap between our life and that of the others. We can try to do our best, but it remains his or her own life.
Yes, I also think that I mean because I also bring to the table how people commonly react to these kinds of arguments, not just
Mm.
about how philosophers think about them. Because I mean, in terms of philosophy, yes, we can understand those arguments, but we also have to admit that some of them are very abstract arguments, like the argument of consent. I mean, because for most people, if you expose them to that argument, they might say, "Yeah, right. I mean, you people don't consent to becoming to coming into existence, but why does that matter? I mean, what can we do with that? There's no one there yet to consent." So, for
Yeah.
most people, that argument doesn't really make sense. You know.
Yeah, and I mean, I have to confess they agree with this perception because there is anyone, and of course it's a decision. I mean, maybe it's better to say, okay, it's a decision that we take for someone who still does not exist, and we decide considering our life. It's
Yeah.
preferable in because, of course, there is anyone, and also in the first year, a kid, a young, a child is not able to give consent.
Yeah.
Uh, is not aware of the life and all the implication of life.
Yeah. So I was going to ask you how much objective suffering do you think there is in human life? I mean, earlier we've already talked a little bit about objectivity and subjectivity when evaluating the good and bad aspects of life. So, do you think that it is possible to approach this question objectively in some way or only subjectively?
Uh, I would say maybe that we can speak about objectivity if we consider some intrinsic aspect of suffering of life. So, for example, I mean, as I said, we cannot establish the same. We don't suffer for the same reason, but we can say that maybe there are some intrinsic. Reason of suffering. The hunger, for example, is one of them. The I don't know the war maybe, but I no the war. I would prefer to speak about some biological aspect, something that is in the related to the way we are into the world. So maybe the consciousness for human being, or maybe also the awareness of this. Why not? Even if we, as I said, we should distinguish between the process of dying and the act. But death, of course, it's something that make people feel trouble with the idea, and that they are going to die and they are going to not stay into the world. Uh, I mean, they stay into the world for a short time and a limited time.
Mhm. Yeah, actually, I mean, I think that, as I said earlier, I mentioned that over time, I distanced myself from some of the arguments that David Benatar makes. And when he evaluates or he tries to evaluate the amount of suffering that people objectively experience in their lives, I mean, I don't really agree with him a lot, because I think that different people, I mean, even if you don't want to consider, for example, people resorting to religion or some other belief system to give meaning to their suffering, it's still the case that different people have different personality traits, and because of the life experiences they are exposed to, they might develop psychologically in different ways, and they don't evaluate similar life events the same. I mean, people might evaluate the same life event. Two different people, one might evaluate it as good or positive, the other one might evaluate it as bad or negative. So I think it's not really that easy to talk about objectively evaluating the good and bad aspects of life.
Yeah, I agree. As I said, also because the same reason can be for me a huge pain. For you, it's something that is doesn't matter. So, um, I mean, we cannot. Actually I like the Venator's list, but because I mean it's quite clear for people. We can is a way to say there are so many reasons. Of course, we don't feel the same features in the same way, but
Mhm.
is a way to say the reason for suffer and are so. I mean, are enough, and each person has its own reason to don't feel confident with life. Maybe we can say this.
Mhm. Yeah. Do you think of death as a harm, or do you think that death is always a harm?
If we consider the final act, I'll say that is not an harm, in my opinion. I think that the death that causes pain, harm, is the death as a process of dying. So the awareness that, as I said before, each day we lost something, and we lost. We always live the death of other people. And I think that this is more painful than our death. So in this way, I would say that it depends. It depends on the way we want to consider death.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, in my opinion or in my
Mm.
perspective, I think that is especially you shouldn't consider death a harm if the person who wishes to die is suffering a lot. I mean, I think
Mm.
that there are lives out there that are so horrible, so terrible, that
Yeah.
particularly if the person who is experiencing it wishes that, wants that, death is actually something good in those particular cases.
Yeah, I think that it's good, but and it's also the topic of my bachelor degree thesis, as I said. But I'm considering maybe disease, and so the kind of end of life question like
Mhm,
euthanasia, assisted suicide.
mhm.
Yeah, of course, their death is. I mean, it's a way to solve the problem. It's not something bad, because. But in that case, I also would say that. Maybe I quite radical, so I don't I speak about my perception, and the way I see the situation. But I think that for people who suffer in that way, their life is already finished. I mean, what remains the biological life, but it's not the biography, the life that we live,
Biographical.
that one that we live every day, and that we experience and that we join every day. It's something that maybe it's not life anymore. We cannot
No.
consider life as the fact that we breathe. But so in that way, I would say that death becomes, yeah, of course, preferable. It's not an harm; it's a way to solve the problem of
Mhm.
life.
Yeah. What do you think are the ethical questions surrounding parenthood that antinatalism raises?
Maybe, yeah, maybe I would say the fact that they act in a selfish way. I think that it's one of the first argument, because it's also the more it's one of the argument that parents and people don't consider when we speak about the fact of bringing someone else into the world. So I think that this is one of the maybe one of the most difficult, but also one of the most evident. So we have to speak about the fact that they decide, but they decide taking into account their own position, their own perception, their desire, and so maybe I would say that one. And I also consider, but I know that it's not so common, but sometimes it's happened that the parents sometimes are not able to stay with the children until they became adults, and this is
Mhm.
also a problem because we cannot. Um, and they are not sure to be able to stay, or to stay even if they stay, but to stay in the right way, because sometimes there are many problems between in the relation, and all these problems are, in my opinion, something that we should take into account when we speak about the relation between parents and children. And first of all, the fact that even if I don't want to speak about the consent, it remains a fact that they decide for someone else, and this person cannot decide for himself or herself about the life. So it remains an asymmetry, of course.
Yes, and I mean, I think that actually all arguments, but at least most arguments used by people to justify reproduction and to justify being parents are not really very convincing, because it's like, oh, it's a biological impulse. Okay, but
Mm,
we've already gone through that, so that's not a very good argument. Oh, it's because everyone does it. I mean, that's also not a very good argument. And another that I find really selfish is, oh, because when I get old, I want to have someone to take care of me. Okay, I can understand that, but it sounds very selfish, because if you think about it deeply, you're creating a new being,
yeah.
just thinking about yourself, just focusing on your own future suffering, and you're putting him or her through the huge risk of dealing with lots of suffering in their own life just to take care of you.
And you must not be sure, because you don't know what happened with your kids. Maybe uh, they die for some reason. They live in another country. They are not available to stay with you until you became older and older.
Yeah.
I mean, there are so many evaluation on the future that we cannot establish before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what responsibilities do you think parents have to their children? Because they brought to the world new beings, new sentient beings, new human beings, particularly. I mean, what kinds of responsibilities do parents have after they've done that?
I think that once they have created a new living being, I mean, maybe of course for sentient beings it's quite different, because most of the parents after the generation leave the animal alone. So I mean, we can speak only about human being in this sense,
Yeah.
and I think that yeah, the education, the presence, or the to be present, to try to give them the best life, but while I mean, I'm assessing it and I'm saying, but what? Oh, so I'm not sure about the reply I'm giving, but because I think that they have many responsibility, and but at the same time, the only responsibilities that I mean, it's what I want to say is that it cannot we cannot speak about responsibility, because if even if they do something and they do their best for give to his or her child the best future and the best life, we cannot know, as we said before. So I think that yeah, the responsibility is maybe to be present and to prevent from harm, from pain. But it's a kind of abstract reply, because as we said, they are not sure to be able to do it.
Yeah, and I think there's a very important point for us to make here, particularly for people who will be watching our conversation who are not antinatalists, because there's many misconceptions out there about antinatalism that people
Mm.
make, and one of them is they think that because we are against reproduction, or we think that reproduction is immoral, that we are anti-children. But that's not the case, because the children that already exist, they should be taken care of, right? And for
Yeah,
example,
of course.
someone might not reproduce, but if they want to become a step parent to take care of an orphan, that's perfect. I mean, that's not just ethical, but it's moral to do that, right? I mean, to
Yeah,
take
yeah,
care
yeah.
of people who already exist, particularly children who are vulnerable, right?
Yeah, yeah, this is true. Of course, the anti-natalism does not mean that we should stop the life of the children who already exist, and but I think that is the responsibility. The responsibility are the normal responsibility that each parents, and not only the parents, each person must have to the other. And sometimes maybe it's not to take care of everyone, but there is a kind of attention to the needs, to the what she yeah, to the life she's going to live. But
Mhm.
yeah, of course, antinatalism, uh, it's so, I mean, it wants to stop procreation, try to explain the reason, but it does not entail with the life of the already living being, of course.
Yeah, but would you say, or do you think antinatalists should say explicitly that becoming a parent is immoral?
Yes, for the reason we discussed, I would say yes, but yeah, I think yes.
Mhm. Let me ask you about other related things. I mean, things that we can relate to antinatalism but are not directly antinatalist. So, how does antinatalism approach assisted fertilization?
Repeat?
How does antinatalism approach assisted fertilization?
Mm. Uh, okay, I would say that as for the fertilization, it depends on what we want to describe with fertilization, because when I consider this topic on my book, I started from a particular novel and the engineering on the DNA, and I think that many people consider that if we were able to modify this engineering, the DNA, we can build up a living being, a new human being, which will be able to not to suffer. And I think that also in this way it represents a selfish way to build up the child, the new human beings in the way you are. The novel I have in mind is Ishiguro's novel Clara and the Sun, and there was a particular history, and in which you can see, you can read, you can understand the selfish reason behind parenthood. So the also the this kind of DNA engineering are yeah, show and confirms the egoistic way, because we can we decide how he must appear and what quality, and I mean. I think it's only a confirmation of the traveling of parenthood.
Yeah. And how about suicide? I mean, earlier we talked about death and whether it is always a harm or not.
Mm.
And I think that we both agree that sometimes it's not only not a harm, but it's also a good thing to die, at least in some situations. But suicide specifically, do you think that antinatalism has something to say about it ethically?
Yes, I would say that we should discuss about suicide, because I mean, if we are saying that it would have been better not to be into the world, not to come into the world, then it's normal to say, okay, if we should not have been into the world, then we should go away. We should commit suicide, and so I think that anti should deal with this topic, and I think that the possible reply are two, because on the one hand, of course, we cannot compare not procreation with the suicide, because in the middle there is the life that we have, that we try to build up in the best way we can. And on the other side, I'll say that, yeah, starting from the idea that not to be into the world, it will be preferable. Maybe we cannot judge in a negative way the suicide. I mean, suicide remain a possibility, an act that man can commit, can decide to do. And I think that the people who decide to commit uh, this big way to die, because you must go against your life, it's quite it must be respect, because it means that the reason for which you prefer to die, there they must be even enough that you prefer to stop your life. So this is what I would say.
Mhm. What do you think are the strongest arguments against antinatalism? I mean, what do you think are the arguments that, when you are exposed to them against antinatalism, are the hardest to tackle?
uh, I can distinguish, because if I consider the reply that other people maybe mm, told me when I was in some conversation, I would say that most of them say that they refuse the role of suffering, or they refuse to consider suffering as a main reason, as we said, and also the that procreation is something that we cannot control because it's nature, or that life is beautiful. And but from the metaphysical perspective, now I'm considering some of this topic, for example, the role of the necessity, and because one of the features of the Greek philosophy, and in my opinion there is a metaphysical perspective there, is that they have to accept the role of the necessity of ananke, so they cannot decide to stop procreation. They must accept that the world is in this way. So maybe my question is that from this perspective, antinatalism is still possible. I mean, we can be quite aware of the suffering or all the stuff as the Greek philosophy and or the poets, but why we don't stop? I mean, maybe there are some other concept forces that we should consider, and forces that, of course, depends. That are independent from us, so that we cannot control. And apart from all, I would say that it's strange maybe as a reply, but I would say that life itself is an argument against the antinatalism, because if we consider the life of people, they find, they establish meaning, they have some aim, all the bias and the mechanisms to defend. So maybe there are many reasons for which is life itself that is in which is not able to see uh, the um, the meaning of antinatalism and to the meaning of life, the reality of life, I would say.
Do you think that antinatalism is a humanist philosophy?
If for human we intend that it concerns with human beings, I would say yes. I would prefer speak about philanthropy, and but if you say it's for humanistic, we consider the fact that it want to defend in some way human beings. I would say that it's not humanistic because of course it's he don't want to find a way to keep human being into life. It's a way to say that human beings and human life is something wrong.
What do you think about extinctionism? Because many times people associate antinatalism to extinctionism. I mean, are you also a proponent of that? And do you think that antinatalism goes hand in hand with extinctionism, or do you break them apart?
I would say that I'm not a proponent of antinatalism, but because anyone is a proponent of antinatalism because of the fact that of
Extinctionism.
extinctionism.
Yeah.
I'm not a proponent of extinctionism, and any people is proponent of extinctionism, but because extinctionism is a fact, it's something that will happen in the future. We don't know when, but it will go happen.
Yeah.
So I think that we can agree, we can disagree, but it's going to happen. And this is my perception. So what I try to discuss and to see, to write, to think is that we should maybe only renovate this factual truth that we are going to extinct. And I think that antinatalism, maybe it moves in this direction because we should consider that we are going to pass away as a species, and not because we are bad, we are not able to stay into the world, but because every other living beings and every other beings we are going to pass, and new living beings maybe come into the world. And but I think that it's a true. It's I mean, how to say the modern philosopher is a matter of fact. It's something real, evident.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that it's just inevitable, even if we as humans, through our own actions, do not lead ourselves to our own extinction. I mean, whether by, altering the environment in ways that we are no longer
Yeah,
able to survive, or through nuclear war, or through, I don't know, super intelligent AI or something like that. I mean, even if we don't do that to ourselves, just from a biological perspective, it's inevitable that we will evolve into other species eventually. So humans at a certain point will no longer exist as
yeah,
humans, at least. Or, I mean, from a physics standpoint, there's lots of evidence that somewhere in the future, even if it is billions of years, trillions of years in the future, there will be a time will arrive where the universe can no longer sustain life. And so, I mean, it doesn't matter what kind of perspective you take, we're just going to go extinct somewhere in the future, right?
Yeah, and also I was also thinking that life was not present from the beginning. So
Yeah.
I mean, it seems that we, I mean, we, it's not the right term, but we wait until the condition were good for the life. And of course, in the future, the condition may be changed, but not because man is responsible of the climate change and all the, I mean, the fight are all argument interesting, but I think that before all this trouble, it happens because it's in the natural evolution of the world. I also consider that now there are some transhumanistic positions that consider that we will be able to overcome the problem of death. Yeah, maybe, but then I think that the result will be something which is not human anymore. So also in this way, it's a kind of extinction of human being in the way we are now.
Yeah, and I mean, this is just my position, but I'm very skeptical when it comes to transhumanism and that claim about us being able to live forever. I mean, I think that there are clear biological limits. And I mean, and the forever bit, I mean, even if you become a transhuman, again, there will arrive a time in the future where the universe will no longer be able to sustain life in whatever form. So,
Yeah.
I mean, you won't be there forever anyway. So,
Yeah, I totally agree.
yeah. So, let me just ask you one final question. How do you think we should approach people when telling them about antinatalism? People who are not antinatalists themselves, people who perhaps haven't even heard about antinatalism before.
Mm, What's I had my professor at the beginning of my when I started to study this topic. I tried to convince people, and my professor once time told me, "You don't have to convince anyone. You what you can do is only to try to." Explain the reason of the anti-natives. Try to be the more clear you can, and to you find argument to explain to say why the antinatalism is a philosophical perspective, and it's a respectable perspective, then because this depends on me, then the people can decide to accept, to criticize, but I don't have to convince anyone. And I think it's true. It's something that now I'm learning to do. I think that we can only try to be clear, try to justify the reason of our position. And I mean, the reason are evident, but maybe we have to explain it. And then I think that there are people who maybe will be interested and studies and know, and maybe they agree with antinatalism, and people who probably prefer other position. As for every perspective, philosophical perspective, but I would say every perspective in general. So that one maybe.
Yeah, great. So let me just tell the audience that the book is again E il nascere che non ci voleva, Storia e teoria dell'Antinatalismo. As I said, my personal translation is It's the Birth We Didn't Want, History and Theory of Antinatalism. I will be leaving a link to it in the description of the interview. And Sarah, apart from the book, are there any places on the internet where people can find you and your work?
I have the personal website in the maybe I can share with you the link, and on
Yeah.
ResearchGate, and on the my personal page with the university.
Yeah. Great. So, just before we finish, let me just say that this is one of my favorite books of 2025. By the end of the year, since 2021, I've been doing posts every year with my favorite nonfiction books of the year, and this one is going to be up there for sure. And it's in Italian. Come on, guys, learn Italian to read this book. If you ever wanted an excuse or a reason to learn Italian, this is a good enough reason. Also, there's the book by Dr. Alberto Acerbi that I'm going to interview just this week as well, Techno Panico. And it's an excellent book. You have to read Italian because I'm going to put up 2 Italian books on my list this year. And if you can't read Italian, you can't read them. Come on, just go and learn Italians. And Sarah, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you.
Hi guys, thank you for watching this interview until the end. If you liked it, please share it, leave a like and hit the subscription button. This show is brought to you by Enlights, Learning and Development Done Differently. Check their website at enlights.com, and also please consider supporting the show on Patreon or PayPal. I would also like to give a huge thank you to my main patrons and PayPal supporters: Per Ergo Larsen, Jerry Mullerens, Frederick Sunda, Bernardo Seixas, Olaf Alex, Adam Kessel, Matthew Whittingburg, Arno Wolf, Tim Hollis, Eric Alenia, John Connors, Philip Forrest Connolly, Dan Demetri, Robert Windiger, Rui Inácio, Zup, Marco Neves, Colin Holbrook, Phil Kavanagh, Mikkel Stormir, Samuel André, Francis Forte, Tiago Nunes, Fergal Cossen, Hal Herzog, Nuno Machado, Jonathan Labyrinth, João Linhares, Stantantia, Samuel Correia, Eric Hines, Mark Smith, João Eira, Tom Hummel, Sardas France, David Sloan Wilson, Yacila Dez Araújo, Romain Roach, Diego Londonho Correia, Yannick Punter, Dana Rusmani, Charlotte Bliss, Nicole Barbaro, Adam Hunt, Pavlo Stasevski, Nelek Bach, Guy Madison, Gary G. Alman, Sam Afzal, Adrian Yeager, Paul Tolentino, João Barbosa, Julian Price, Edward Hall, Edin Bronner, Douglas Fry, Franca Bortolotti, Gabriel Ponce Cortez, Ursula Litsky, Scott, Zachary Fish, Tim Duffy, Sonny Smith, John Wiseman, Daniel Friedman, William Buckner, Paul George Arnaud, Luke Lowacki, Georgios Theophanous, Chris Williamson, Peter Wolozin, David Williams, Diogo Costa, Anton Erickson, Charles Murray, Alex Shaw, Maury Martinez, Coralie Chevalier, Bangalore Atheists, Larry D. Lee Jr., Old Erringbone, Sterry, Michael Bailey, Dan Sperber, Robert Grassi, Zigoren, Jeff McMahon, Jake Zool, Barnabas Radix, Mark Campbell, Thomas Dovner, Luke Nissen, Chris Story, Kimberly Johnson, Benjamin Galbert, Jessica Nowicki, Linda Brandon, Nicholas Carlson, Ismail Benzliman, George Coriatis, Valentin Steinman, Per Crowley, Kate Van Goller, Alexander Hubbard, Liam Dunaway, BR, Masood Ali Mohammadi, Perpendicular, Jonas Hertner, Ursula Goodenough, Gregory Hastings, David Pinsoff, Sean Nelson, Mike Lavigne, and Dios Necht. A special thanks to my producers, Isar Webb, Jim Frank, Lucas Stafiniak, Tom Vanagdam, Bernard Ugni, Curtis Dixon, Benedict Mueller, Thomas Trumbull, Catherine and Patrick Tobin, Giancarlo Montenegro, Alni Ortiz, and Nick Golden, and to my executive producers, Matthew Lavender, Sergio Quadrian, Bogdan Kanivets, and Rosie. Thank you for all.